I'm seeing many hands here. Perhaps what we should do is just start with Donald, and then Bob, and then I saw somebody with a beard. Thank you. Let's start with Donald.
Okay, we'll start with the unbearded man, the beard. Thanks, Martha. I think there's room for perhaps for more overlap in our views than one might think at first. So I just wanted to look a little bit at your response to the Bale dog case. Mm-hmm. And so I think we agree both that the dog ends up in a state of pain for which it not only does not have a desire, but on Leibniz's psychology, it would not have a desire, right? And so the explanation of how it ends up in that state is to be given in terms of unconscious appetitions it has for that state. And then the real question is, how are we going to characterize those appetitions? Mm-hmm. And I'm interpreting them in terms of the so-called natural teleology, or directed towards something without having a representation of that end state as being good. Now, you want to say that these unconscious appetitions do at some level involve a representation of that state as good. And then what I'm now curious about is in what sense they represent that state as good. And what I was hearing in your account was that in those unconscious appetitions might be representing the harmony of the universe in some sense. I thought you said something like that was the goodness that was going to be represented within it.
Is that the question?
Well, so that's the beginning of the question. So, so that's where I'm thinking, maybe the accounts aren't quite as far away as they might have seemed at first, because on my account also they were directed towards a harmonious state of the universe. And then the question is, in what sense is that harmony actually represented within the perceptual state that has that particular striving? And just one thing I throw out for you is that, Leibniz often explains harmony as being the consonance of disharmony, or, you take a lot of things that in and of themselves are ugly or dissonant, and you put them together and you get a harmony. And so, in some sense, what you're implying, I take it, in this account, is that each and every one of those petites perceptions, or appetites, so I was making this mistake, I know it before, even each and every one of these little appetitions is in some sense representing the harmony of the universe as a whole. But that seems to me a little bit strange if that's taken to be actually the content of a very, very small part of the representational state of the entire monad.
Yeah, I agree about that. Well, let's see. It does. What I think has some attraction because of its harmony is regular change in the bodies that are perceived by the monad. Regularity, there's a diversity under a kind of regular pattern. That's a kind of harmony. And that is what I am thinking that the minute perceptions of a monad represent, and it's that good, that value to which I'm thinking that the appetites that go along with those minute perceptions are responsive. I rather doubt that any but an intellectual monad can form a conception of the world as a whole and the harmony of the world as a whole. So I do not think that is that for which the monad has these little appetites. It's just the constant proceeding of things proceeding in a regular way. What I want to stress about assigning this kind of desiderative nature to all of the appetites is that brings them in the scope of an explanatory theory that will connect the presence of those appetites with the content of their perceptions. And also, those two explain that with a tendency toward future action, which is lost if you deny that there's a desire-like character of the appetites that are contributing to the act that the monad actually perceives. So as I understand it, and I'd like the way you presented it today, that kind of explanatory connection would go so far down into the monads, but then below that level, there would be no room for that explanatory connection. And what I want to say is that I don't see any reason not to extend it, not to extend some kind of desire-like character to all of the appetitions, which would allow you to extend that explanatory theory all the way down.
So just to take another, just to follow up once, take another sort of case where there's no intentionality involved on the part of an agent at all, right? Somebody is pushed or something like that, and you move from one perceptual state to another. In that case, we don't have that kind of large-scale appetite for a state that is perceived as being good or pleasurable or anything like that. But on your account, you want to say that each and every one of the little perceptions that make up that very, very infinitely complex perceptual state is representing a future state as being in some sense or another good, right? But then that sense in which that future state is good is that it presumably has to be, it's the goodness of the physical state of the universe. Because it's not, the future state is not in any way directed, its future state is not in any way concerned with the satisfaction of a particular macroscopic desire that the creature happens to have.
I'm thinking that the future state of the corporeal universe is attained by the future states of endlessly many tiny little bodies. Mm-hmm. And so what the monad has desire-like states with regard to are these many, many motions of many, many tiny bodies. And what's attractive about that is just that they are relative to preceding and succeeding actions irregular.
Okay, I think I understand it. So that the body of the macroscopic creature is comprised of all of these infinitely many smaller bodies, each of which have their own end-directed desires,
Yep.
and that's how you're going to cash out the.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Paul.
Yes. I think my question is similar. I suppose but what you just said gives me another one. Maybe I'll start with that. I had been focused on what I took you to be implying about the causality of the perceptions and appetitions of a single substance. I would have thought that that can't be simply a matter of the of the causality of the perceptions of substances that are part of its body, because it has to be in harmony with those, so there has to be an account of the causality of its perceptions. And on that assumption, what you were saying there, I found it very interesting. It suggested to me, however, something that I have long sort of wished Leibniz had said, but have not found him actually saying, and in fact, which seems to be in conflict with things that he actually says. So what I've had in mind is this. It clearly is his view that if one takes the whole perceptual state of any monad at any time, that state is in some sense a perception of the whole history of the corporeal universe, but not just the corporeal universe, the whole universe. It's a representation of the best of all possible worlds, and from a certain point of view. And the succeeding perceptual states take the whole state, which is mostly the unconscious perceptions, again, a representation of the whole of the best of all possible worlds, but from the successively different points of view that that monad occupies at different times. And then, as it were, what I sort of have always wished Leibniz had done is try to put that together with the theory of happiness, in which he was passionately interested, in which the happiness of a substance depends both on, I mean, it's some function of both the distinctness of its perceptions and the perfection of what it's perceiving. And, you know, it has always seemed to me as if someone holding the views that Leibniz did, apart from any social ecclesial context, ought in some sense to have come up with the view that insofar as each substance perceives the best of all possible worlds, it should be as happy as it could possibly be. And that seems to lead toward a doctrine of universal salvation, not just for all human beings, but all substances in some sense. And that, of course, is a place that Leibniz steadfastly refused to go. And I'm not inclined to think that he was simply dissembling, although I think that, I mean, there's a longer story, I think, about just exactly what the epistemological modality is of his refusing to go there. But at any rate, it seems to lead to a place that he refuses to go. And of course, he never says what, you know, anything but the starting points of what I just said. So what would you say about that?
Leibniz distinguishes between monads that are capable of happiness and those that aren't, on the basis of the distinction between monads capable of reflection.
Yes.
So happiness and misery pertain only to creatures that are able to be aware of themselves and sort of own that their perceptions and desires are their own, and I think deliberate about them and have a concern for what they do in the future. I would have thought, and of course I'm interested in what you think about this, but I would have thought that that sufficed to distinguish between the state that's realized by every monad, which would not be properly called happiness. I mean, I was using the word satisfaction. It's kind of a satisfied, so far as possible, of course, given